Ara History Untold is coming out soon, and you have been probably wondering, well, what is it? And is it just another Civilization clone? And the good answer I can give you immediately is no, it isn't. It is actually very, very different from Civilization games. Yes, it's a 4X game, like Civilization is, but it is more like comparing soccer to basketball. Yeah, there are similarities. There's a ball in play, there are people on the field, you have to score points, right? But in itself, it's very different games, and that is true for Our History Untold and Civilization. Or if you would have to compare it with games, let's take Call of Duty and Battlefield. Shooters, sure, but very different. So, with that said, let's talk about the details and what makes it so different to Civilization. But before we do this, let me make something very clear. I have been playing this game for months now, mostly under NDA, and I'm not yet fully allowed to talk about everything. There are a few things I'm allowed to talk about, and there are another few things I'm not allowed to talk about, right? The same goes for the footage you are seeing here in the background. This is footage which is officially available through the official channels, and that's what I'm using here. I'm not allowed to use my self-recorded footage yet, but that will hopefully change. With that said, let's jump into it. So, Our History Untold starts like Civilization. You are choosing your civilization, you are choosing your leader at the beginning of the game, and no, you're not swapping them out. You are sticking with them throughout the whole game till you're starting a new one, of course. And a little bit different than Civilization is that they try to make every leader slash civilization usable throughout the game. In the Civ games, you have this small window in which your specific civilization is accelerating and where you can basically put them to best use. Ara is trying to make it so that your civilization is really good at certain things, and those things will be important throughout the whole game. So it gives you much more leeway on just playing the strength of your civilization. And when you were starting the game, you were starting in the ancient era. I think there are, how many eras are there? 15, 19? I always forget. There are a bunch of them. They're definitely doing it similar to the older Civ games, so not like Civilization 7, where they have only 3 eras and then they are putting like a lot of eras inside of the era, right? They're not doing that. They're doing the old way of how Civilization does it with the amount of eras. What you will do, though, to go into the next era is you need a certain amount of resources and a certain amount of research, and then you can start to move into the next era. So it's not something you are doing automatically by just moving through the research tree. You have to trigger it. But let's go back to the beginning. You are starting out your civilization. You are building your first city. You are choosing where that city starts off. And the first thing you immediately notice is, wait a minute, where's my grid? Where are my hexagons? What's going on here? So there is no grid-based system, or at least not a visible one, and there are no hexagons. You are moving freely on the map. Yes, your units have, of course, a limited amount of movement per turn, because this is still a turn-based game, but there's no grid. And this is very interesting for your units, because that also means that you can put multiple units together and you can actually create big armies, which will then also fight as one army. So this whole thing of just moving one unit around and attacking with one unit doesn't really apply here, but we will talk about this more when we are going into the combat segment in another video. Now, let's talk about building a city. How do you build a city when there is no grid system, right? So there is still some sort of grid system. There is a zone and area system. So basically, you are choosing a zone, and in that zone, you have smaller zones where you can put your tile improvements and where you can build something. And the interesting part is also that you can choose in which direction your city is expanding. So it's not random, you make that decision. And like in the Civ games, you will then see what this zone has to offer, like how much food it can provide. Is there like rare resources? Is there production in there? The whole shebang. But what you will also notice is, wait, you talk about production, but there are no like cogwheels, right? There is no production symbol. There is only stone and wood at the beginning. What does that mean for production? So the interesting part here is that Ara doesn't really have just production, but works with tons of resources. There's a whole resource change, closer to what Millennia did, but much, much closer how actually Anno works. So you want to produce a lot of certain resources. You can also use them for trading and to expand your empire. Let me give you a super simple example of this, how this works. You are putting down a farm in a fertile area, and now the farm is producing food. But you realize, oh, well, that's awkward. The people are working literally with their bare hands. So the next thing you want to do is you want to build a workshop in the close vicinity to stone, and those people will now start to harvest the stone, and you can decide what to do with the stone. So it's not that the building is automatically just producing something. You have to tell the building what to do with the stone or with the wood or with the other resources. And in this case, we're just telling the workshop, okay, build some tools. And every 5 round, we are getting one tool I can then distribute to whatever building which can utilize tools, in this case, the farm. And the farm is now producing more food. And you can do that with every building. Sometimes it's just producing more resources, or sometimes it will cut down the time you need to actually produce something significantly. Like, let's say you want to produce some medicine, which is really important for your people in your cities, and you do not have the resources nearby. It will now take 29 turns to just produce one medicine. But if you have all the herbs nearby and also put a little bit of money into it, it will only take 5 rounds to produce one medicine, right? So you have this huge production chain which is going on in the background. And that leads us to the next thing, which is the interface. Yes, I'm mentioning the interface in particular here because this is where you really realize how much you are going into the nitty gritty of building your empire. It's actually much closer to Paradox grand strategy games like Europa Universalis or Victoria 3, right? Where you have like tons of different interfaces and menus and spreadsheets you're working yourself through to just get the best out of your empire, right? So if I would have to compare Ara, then I would compare it a little bit more with Victoria, probably. That's at least the feeling I got from now playing it for so long. The same goes when you are going into the world and you are exploring. Yeah, there are tons of things you can find there, tons of resources, wild animals you have to find. You can find treasure, of course, but you will also find other civilizations and tons of small cities and villages which are not aligned to anything, and you can decide if you want to conquer them, if you want to take them over, or if you want to trade with them, if you want to be in a good standing with them, right? And they are not really ambitious. They exist for their own thing, and they will sometimes disappear over time, or somebody else is coming in and conquering them. There's a lot of map dynamic going on, and even when you are meeting other civilizations, and there are a few civilizations which are focusing a little bit more on warfare, everyone is kind of trying to first get along with each other. Like, warfare in this game seems to be like the last resort, like really a thing which happens. But if you play this game well, and if you were doing it right, you might never have to go to war with anyone, and you can still win those games, which of course is a nice thing, right? And so, yeah, actually having diplomacy relations with other nations and do a lot of trading is really important, because your nation will not have all the resources it needs to produce certain items. That's not how the game works. The game wants you to trade. And this is where the whole Anno thing is really kicking in and gives you this feeling of, okay, I'm focusing a lot on the production chain. And I know some people don't like this. Some people like the more board game approach Civilization is focusing on, right? It's very surface level, and that's what some people want. But if you always thought, man, I really want to go into the nitty gritty of building my empire, I'm more at home at grand strategy games from Paradox, then Ara History Untold is definitely a game you should keep an eye out for. And with that said, we're at the end of the video. I hope this was helpful. If it was, please leave a like. If you still have some questions, let me know down below in the comments. And if you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe. I would appreciate that because we are focusing here on strategy, building, and management games on the Mole Under Management channel. And if that is your jam, you came to the right place. With that said, thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.